everyone. Welcome to Paploo-core History and Lore, the only show on Facebook where we go into the depths of the former extended universe to learn more about Star Wars. I'm stuck in Ohio, which I don't know if you guys have heard, is proof of climate change capital of the United States. We had 19 tornadoes in one day, which is our usual average. We also had 6 days of flash flood warnings in central Ohio. I wanted to cover something on today's episode that reminded me of home. Today on History and Lore, we're not going to be looking at some Jedi that was in like 6 frames of a Star Wars prequel. We're not looking at our favorite Ewok. Today, we're looking at something much, much bigger. An entire planet. Kamino, also known as Big Stormy, also known as Planet of the Storms, also known as the best setting in Episode 2 Attack of the Clones, also known as James Cameron's Avatar 2, is a giant water planet. This bitch is Hurricane Katrina 24/7. But instead of George Bush not caring about black people,
George Bush doesn't care about black people.
This planet is full to the brim of the most generic looking alien creatures that George Lucas and his neckfolds have ever approved of. These 1960s UFO tabloid looking motherfuckers are called Kaminoans. Very original name. It literally translates to the native people of Kamino. Well, despite being on screen for like 10 minutes in the worst Star Wars movie before Disney decided to say, hold my beer, these Kaminoans are actually one of the most important alien races in all of the Star Wars universe. And you probably know why. These Close Encounters of the Third Kind ripoffs created the Mark I saber dart that Jango Fett used to kill Zam Wesell. You know Zam Wesell, right? The female bounty hunter that tried to spill the beans on the assassination attempts of Padme, but then got no-scoped across the map by Jango Fett, who makes like the best trick shot over 2 Jedi in the history of the entire franchise? Just kidding. The only reason George Lucas and his creative team came up with Kamino was to be the home for the clone army. Something you may not know, however, is that Kamino is only home to 3 native species: Kaminoans, Erwa, and a species not too unfamiliar to our planet here, Earth, krill. Despite the crippling lack of ecological depth, Kamino boasts a pretty impressive population of 1 billion. That's a pretty crazy amount of Roswell rejects. Kamino also has 2 invasive species, a slightly better child actor than Jake Lloyd, and Sasaltans. One thing that is rather alarming about Kamino is it was once a planet comprised of a molten core with a rocky mantle and silicate rock crust. However, climate change submerged this planet's continents, drowning the entire planet in a global ocean. 100% of the planet's surface area is covered in water, but only the tips of the highest mountains are habitable and are subject to constant storms. So essentially, Kamino is Earth in 35 years. Kamino is beyond the outer rim, somewhere between the main galaxy and the Rishi-Maze dwarf galaxy, somewhere in wild space. This selection leaves the Kaminoans very isolated. Their main export and means of survival is by advancing their technology and military weapons to essentially fund the rest of the galaxy's arms and, eventually, armies. And their biggest import is food. Keep that in mind for later.
That's a surprise tool that can help us later.
What's that smell? It smells like a pretentious film major. Oh, it's just me. Anyway, it's time for a new segment. Remember when I said these Close Encounters of the Third Kind ripoffs created the Mark I saber dart that Jango Fett used to kill Zam Wesell? Well, I wasn't joking. Everyone knows that George Lucas and Steven Spielberg are longtime collaborators. But George Lucas admittedly borrowed the alien design from Close Encounters of the Third Kind for Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Now, this isn't completely out of the ordinary. As in E.T., Spielberg insisted that Elliot have a bunch of Star Wars toys in his room. And on Halloween, E.T. tries to communicate with a kid dressed up as Yoda. This is perhaps the only familiar face for E.T., as his race, the Asogians, are members of the Galactic Senate of the Republic in Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. But all this elbow nudging originates from a bet between the two auteurs in 1977. Both directors were releasing a science fiction film. Lucas felt Spielberg was sitting on a gold mine with his motion picture, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. But Spielberg, hot off the success of 1975's Jaws, thought that Star Wars might have some blockbuster potential. They each bet 2.5% of the return of the movie's profit that the other's movie would be more successful. Close Encounter of the Third Kind's mature themes on alien invasion really resonated with audiences and critics alike, and it grossed approximately $300 million US. Star Wars, on the other hand, over doubled that with $800 million US domestically, making Star Wars a part of something much, much bigger than either auteur originally expected it to be. From this little bet that the two friends had wagered, Spielberg had won over $40 million. Under all this money talk, there's something very significant about this bet for the two filmmakers, as 1977 could have been a turning point for both of the young directors' career. Both Lucas and Spielberg were perceived as hotshots back in the day. The Directors Guild of America was not very fond of the film school brats, a nickname associated with a bunch of young directors at the time who came from film schools. Directors like Lucas, Scorsese, Spielberg, Ford Coppola, just to name a few. But Close Encounters of the Third Kind was the first Steven Spielberg film to win an Academy Award. Vilmos Zsigmond won for Best Cinematography. It seemed like the industry was finally taking these film school brats seriously. Lucas became focused on technical advancements and making commercial success. And Spielberg became the director's director, winning several Academy Awards for making whimsical, fantastic, yet profound movies. The two men would cross paths more on Indiana Jones than anything else. And there are plenty of Star Wars Easter eggs to be had there. Which leads me to a bit of a conspiracy theory.
The answer to 1984 is
Paploo-core, your favorite Ewok.
You don't need me to tell you how dark our world has become, with the popularity of UFOs being discussed now more than ever because of new, recently released documents from the Pentagon. From Commander Fravor and the Tic Tac at 80,000 feet to Bob Lazar's original whistleblowing making more sense now than ever before. We live at the dawn of a new era, the dawn of alien technology. A bunch of fucking millennials are throwing themselves into the government's line of fire at Area 51 just to get a peek into what's inside. This is the beginning of the end. Sorry about that, I got a little bit carried away. Anyway, no species in all of the Star Wars universe has more technological advancements to its name than the Kaminoans. From special military and commercial weapons to ships and medical droids, it seems despite their isolation in wild space, the Kaminoans are perhaps some of the greatest minds in the entire Star Wars universe. But what if their design nod was more than an Easter egg, if you will? Suspend your disbelief for just a moment. What if the Kaminoans are the same species from Close Encounters of the Third Kind? I mean, we know they both have a vast appreciation for music. Their technologies are both far superior to anything here on Earth. Now, let's go down the rabbit hole one step further. The series that Spielberg and Lucas collaborated on the most was Indiana Jones. In the fourth installment of that franchise, The Kingdom of the Crystal Skull focuses heavy on the concept of alien life. Now, if they just wanted the Council of Aliens at the end to represent some sort of omnipotent force, like God in Raiders of the Lost Ark, they didn't need to show the alien, but instead they do. A physical alien appears to kill Cate Blanchett's character when she asks to know everything that they know. But what does that alien look like? the same generic-looking Spielbergian alien that we now know as the Kaminoans. Well, in the context of the Indiana Jones universe, what purpose do the aliens have visiting Earth again? Is it to be worshipped as the film implies? Or maybe the Kaminoans visit Earth to fix and fill their biggest void, a lack of food on a dying planet. Due to the surface area of their planet being 100% water, plant life doesn't grow naturally on Kamino. Therefore, the only natural food chain is krill to Erwa to Kaminoan. But the natural species of the Kaminoans doesn't look like they're entirely satisfied on a whale. But this proves that they are 100% carnivorous and only eat meat. I believe the Kaminoans created cloning as a means to solve their food crisis. Perhaps the first few batch of clones were made from the indigenous people of South America. They left behind a couple of artifacts so the people of Earth would know who to fear, and perhaps these people were cloned again and again and again to be eaten and devoured by the aliens of Kamino. And perhaps it wasn't until Jango Fett, a Mandalorian humanoid bounty hunter, came to their planet looking for weapons that they discovered perhaps they could clone an army, arm them with their weapons, their technology, and have enough force to have control over the rest of the Star Wars universe. That force and that power causes them to never have to worry about where their next meal is coming from ever again. This has been Paploo Wars. Thank you very much. Over and out. Well, it looks like this is all the time we have for today, but thank you very much for checking out Paploo-core history and lore. If you enjoyed this video, please let me know, and be sure to leave a comment. Let me know what you thought. I hope to do this a lot more. Stay tuned for more to come.